Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Baggott. I'm the editor of Car Dealer magazine, and today joining us is Derren Martin, director of valuations for Cap HPI. Derren, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very good, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us for our regular monthly update on used car prices. Lots being talked about in the press at the moment about used car prices, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But firstly, let's start with those headlines. How are prices doing in November? Are they going up or down?
So they're going down. 1.2% was the drop in November. There's different ways of looking at that. Really, it's the third highest movement down this year, but it's also one of the strongest Novembers that we've seen looking back over time. So it's a small movement down, I would say, but for the time of year, it's pretty strong. And also with all of the press about the cost of living and all of those sorts of things, that it's been a reasonable month for retailers. But there is I think more so than ever, the devil's in the detail this month.
Yeah, I mean, lots to look at with that figure. I mean, firstly, I mean, let's just explain to those watching, because there's sometimes some confusion about where you get your prices from. So let's just explain. We're talking trade price values, aren't we?
Yeah, so it's trade prices. We've got I think it's 55 sources of trade data now. It's from the auctions, it's from rental companies, it's remarketing companies, it's from manufacturers, leasing companies. So a real wide range of sold data that comes into us. I've got a team of editors that will then analyze that data and move values accordingly through the month in our live product. So if a car sells today at an auction site, we get that data tomorrow. So we're real time with the sold data.
So we're talking about the prices that dealers are paying other dealers effectively for cars they're going to then sell on to consumers, aren't we? So we reported recently, I think it was last week, on AutoTrader data that actually showed that from what they're seeing on the retail side, prices have risen in November by £300. So where's that sort of disconnect in the prices that they're paying in trade and the prices they're charging consumers? Can we explain how that works?
Well, there's obviously different ways of analysing it. AutoTrader will be analysing advertised prices from all of the 400 odd thousand adverts that they get on their site. So there could be age and mileage differences within that show that values have increased. And it's a different data set, really. So we're valuing trade data. We do look at retail as well, and I think in the retail side, we've seen some values dropping, but it's probably selective with retailers adjusting values on vehicles that have been in stock for a period of time. So it's a different data set, really, and AutoTrader are very strong on their retail values. On the trade side, though, we are seeing values drop. But as I say, that's fairly normal for the time of year. In November previously, we've seen 3% drops. So for it to be 1.2%, that is pretty strong.
Do you think there is a bit of a disconnect between what consumers think's happening in the used car market and what is really happening? I mean, do you think from the stories that I'm reading in some of the press, they're talking about I'm talking mainstream media talking about a cliff edge in prices. It's dropping off. There was a piece in the Sunday Times at the weekend you may have seen about prices dropping off. What would you say when you read those reports, and what would you say to consumers when they're looking at the used car market?
Yeah, we get contacted quite a lot by the sort of consumer media, by the national press, and it's not a story unless there's this cliff edge or there's a crash coming. Last year, values went up by 30 odd %, which is absolutely unprecedented, unheard of, and yeah, it's a story if they're going to crash again. And the cost of living concerns, your car's going to be worth less. It's just not going to happen, though. And there is some sort of very lazy journalism, I guess, around that there isn't going to be a crash. There hasn't been a crash. If values drop for 2 or 3 months on the trot, that's fairly normal. Values drop because vehicles age in their life cycle, so they're getting older, so they're slightly less desirable than the new ones coming in. And then you've got supply and demand dynamics that come into play. And the reason that cars aren't going to just drop in value in the used car market is because there's just simply not enough supply. There's 2 million less registrations in the market because of the semiconductor issues, all off the back of COVID. Those cars are never going to appear. Those were never registered. They're never going to come through as used cars. So there's just not the supply there to cause a huge crash. And we said it at the time when values went up. We've reached a new level for used car prices. They are more expensive now.
And is that going to continue going forward? I mean, the big question is there ever going to be a major readjustment in prices back to what we saw in the past? You know, you've already mentioned used car prices went up considerably last year, 30%, I think, when you look at some data. Is that ever going to be readjusted?
Well, ever's a long time, and you never know what's around the corner. But I certainly, from all the analysis we've got from our forecasts, where we're forecasting 3-5 years in the future, we don't see that happening. There will be some downward movement, and you'll get downward movement on cars that are overpriced, cars that are above cost new, for example, above the new car price. They've been able to be above the new car price because you can't get the new car. Once that new car supply starts coming through, then it will be different. And so there will be some cars that drop in value by more than others. There'll be the ones that are probably overpriced anyway, and they will come down to a more natural level. But overall, there won't be a crash. As I say, there won't be this what goes up must come down. Values will come down, but they'll probably come down quite gently. They have been coming down quite gently. It's been a very stable year this year. As new car supply improves next year, cost of living concerns hit, you will get changes in those supply and demand dynamics, but we're certainly not predicting that values will come down by anywhere near what they went up by. So it has been a new level reached.
And just to give that some context, what do we think used car prices are going to end the year at? I mean, plus or minus, and what sort of percent would that be for this year, you think?
So this year, when you look at sort of well, we include plate uplifts in that, so that you're comparing a 3-year-old vehicle with a 3-year-old vehicle at the start of the year. The drop is going to be around 3%, something like that, over the course of the year. That's pretty normal. That's very stable, really. We've had sort of a couple of months of drops, which caused most of that, which was in March and April, and then since then we've had a very stable summer where, as I say, there's just not been the supply coming through to cause that. So overall, yeah, it will be a fairly normal year for values, on the strong side, though, I would say.
And that is on that figure that is a lot higher off the back of last
Oh,
year.
yeah, we've got cars that we track that are 70% higher than they were 3 years ago at the same age and mileage point. £20,000 on things like a V-Class. There's some crazy values that happened, but those cars, that's what they're selling for now, and that's what people's cars are worth.
And the other thing is new car prices are going up and going up quite rapidly, aren't they? What sort of impact's that going to have on the market?
Yeah, that can obviously mean that could counter some of those drops on cars that are above cost new. If manufacturers put new car prices up, it can help used car values, because it just means they don't have to drop by as much. So obviously, yeah, with inflation, that is what's happening.
And tell me about some of the stuff that is underperforming and some of the stuff that's really performing at the moment.
The story this month, without a doubt, is electric vehicles. So that 1.2% decrease on average for electric vehicles, it's 3.7% decrease. Sorry, so 1.2% decrease, it's 3.7% for electric vehicles.
Right.
There seems to be consumer demand has dropped away for EVs. I spoke to someone the other day who said that to charge their car, it was cost £70 because they did it on the motorway. So that's equivalent to petrol and diesel. And also electric vehicles are expensive. They're around, well, it varies, but they can be £10,000, £12,000 more than the ICE equivalent. So it comes under that sort of aspirational banner as well. And people affected by the cost of living just are not necessarily going out and buying an EV at the moment. They're expensive vehicles. There's more of them coming back into the market. So it's kind of the wrong time. Demand dropping away, supply increasing. That really only leads to one thing, especially on an expensive vehicle. So there has been some pretty large drops this month on some example vehicles. So Tesla has come down. I think it's come down 7% this month. It's come down 16%, Model 3 in the last 3 months. So that's about £7,000. there are some big chunks coming out of some of those electric vehicles. It's not just Tesla either by any stretch of the imagination, but Tesla does seem to be one where there's a lot of volume coming back in, and they are quite expensive. So yeah, we're definitely seeing a pattern there. From speaking to dealers, they're concerned about electric vehicle prices. Speak to the auctions, they're talking to us about it as well and saying, are you seeing the same as us? And obviously we are. So yeah, there's definite concerns around electric vehicles. But once they reach a price level, they may become more attractive again, and then and demand will pick up as well. So, but yeah, that is definitely the story this month. That petrol and diesel cars have performed okay. Electric vehicles, almost across the board, have reduced.
And touching, I mean, that is a very interesting point you make about the electric cars. And what's happening with diesels? I mean, we've seen the demand for new diesel cars absolutely drop off a cliff. What's happening in the used car market? I mean, it's from historically what we've said is it's normally been pretty strong. Is that still the case?
Yeah, so diesels held up well. They went last year. They went up in value along with everything else, and they've held up pretty well now this year as well. Yeah, I mean it's less than 10% of the new market now, isn't it? So diesel cars in the used market. It depends where you live. If you live around a city that's got a clean air zone, maybe you don't want an older diesel. But if you're a little bit more rural, then yeah, they've definitely got a place. And yeah, we've seen diesel values holding up quite well. They have dropped earlier on this year, but over the last couple of months, they've actually performed stronger, well, certainly stronger than electric vehicles, and as strong, if not stronger than petrol vehicles. So there's definitely still a marketplace for diesel.
Yeah, I've been thinking about diesels a little bit more when you drive past the fuel stations and see the difference, the discrepancy in price between diesel and petrol. That advantage that you get in MPG is probably being rapidly eroded in the increased costing of diesel. Do you think that's going to have an impact on prices as we go forward?
Yeah, to buy a diesel car, you've got to do the miles, really. You've got to do the maths on any fuel type now. You've got to think about it a bit more than previously. And obviously, the government legislation pushed diesel cars quite a lot over the years. But you've definitely got to do the maths on whether it works for you. And if you're just doing short journeys and not doing great many miles, then diesel's probably not for you. But I think diesel will probably hold up quite well, but just because the volumes are a lot lower in the market and have been for sort of especially on those younger cars. So yeah, and obviously if you SUVs, diesel still works for you. Those smaller cars probably not, and manufacturers tend not to be producing them anymore either. So yeah, I think that there's no reason for concern. I guess the only fly in the ointment could be legislation. If they sort of ban diesel in more places, then that becomes an issue, and then that can affect values. That could be sort of regional though.
And anything going up in November? Any cars performing well?
Across in general, I mean, there'll always be snippets of cars that go up that perform quite well, but in general, it is a movement down for most vehicles. Even sort of city cars that have performed well previously have dropped in value. But yeah, there will be some examples of cars that have kind of performed well, but it is yeah, there's slightly less of them around really. And it's not a general theme that it's city cars that are performing better. It's really where there's lower volume. And yeah, they're sought after vehicles.
And for people looking at that headline figure of a 1.2% reduction this month, I mean, what would you say to them about what's coming next? And what was that drop a surprise?
No, it wasn't a surprise. A few months ago, we were predicting about a 5% drop in a 2-month period. So it's actually stronger than we thought it was going to be. But we were expecting it to drop, but yeah, it's probably in line with where we were when we were looking at it a month ago. Looking at it 2 or 3 months ago, we would have been predicting more of a drop, especially with all the cost of living concerns that are happening. What comes next? I mean, that's a really interesting one, because January, you can tend to get a bounce back. Are people going to be logging on Boxing Day and going on used car websites and looking for cars this year with all the concerns around spending? I'm not quite sure. I've not spoken to a single dealer that is saying they're stocking up for January. Last year, a lot of them were. They're replacing cars rather than stocking up. I think it remains to be seen what happens in January, but the counterbalance to everything is low supply still.
Yeah.
From speaking to the manufacturers, they're still not anywhere back to normal. The year's not going to end up anywhere near a normal year for registrations. Next year will be down as well. I think the SMMT are saying sort of 1.8 million for next year. That's certainly sort of where we're seeing things. Which, I mean, it's been 2.3 million in the past. So there just won't be the cars in the market to cause a seismic shock. So I think it'll be quite stable in January.
And Derren, what will a recession mean to used car prices in the used car market?
So we've tracked back over previous recessions, early 90s, around 2000, 2008 with the sort of the financial crisis. Used car values in 2008, they were hit. They came back very quickly in 2009. The two recessions that we've sort of tracked before that, used car values were pretty good, pretty strong. You get dynamics within a recession where consumers may not buy a new car, they might buy a used car. They may downsize, but they still need transport. So that will force them into the market to buy a used car. So in general, when we get into a recession, used cars are buoyant. We've got a great industry. Dealers work really hard. They're getting back to basics more now than they had to do last year. They'll have to adjust some pricing and things like that. But overall, I think we're in for a strong year next year in what is going to be a difficult market. But I think because of that lack of volume and the fact that people will still need to transport and buy cars, I think prices will hold up quite well.
Derren, thank you very much for your time today. Hopefully we'll chat again before Christmas and you can give us a bit of an update on what's happening in December and what's happening into the new year. But thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks, James.
Thank you. That's Derren Martin from Cap HPI there. Right, for the very latest on the industry and used car prices, log on to our website, cardealermagazine.co.uk. I'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.